Nguyen, and I was born in Thailand.
Nepal.
In northeastern of China.
I was born in the hospital district of St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm Viet.
I was born in Nguyen, Vietnam. I left when I was 2 years old and was in a refugee camp in the Philippines. Was resettled here on the east side of St. Paul. I'm Vietnamese, I'm Irish, I'm American, I'm all the things I want to be and don't want to be at the same time.
Hi everyone, my name is Tri, or Tri if you're a Vietnamese-speaking person, and I was born in Vietnam. I'm going to be your guest host in this special series. Over the years, Green Card Voices has had the honor of amplifying the voices of many Asian immigrants as they share their stories of coming to America. We are tremendously thankful for their outstanding contributions and long-standing friendship. We stand with you, today and every day. Today, we're going to be hearing from Mk and Hoang, who is a cultural worker based in the Frogtown neighborhood of St. Paul, Minnesota, Minnesota. She spends most of her time struggling to catch up her parenting to her kids' child development. She draws strength from the humble bumblebee and their power to cross-pollinate and remind us of our interdependence. We'll also be hearing from Hoang Murphy, who's the founder and executive director of Foster Advocates, a social venture that aims to improve the child welfare system in Minnesota by providing advocacy, policy, and organizing with former foster care recipients in impacted communities. In his spare time, he likes to brag about the east side of St. Paul, cook, and lament about the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let's join in the conversation with Mk and Hoang. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second episode of the Green Card Voices #Love Your Asian Neighbors podcast. We're excited to have you both here. And by you both, I mean Hoang and Mk, who folks listening will get to know a little bit more after I go through some intro stuff. So we are continuing the #Love Your Asian Neighbors campaign, where we promote and try to spotlight Asians who live in the U.S. in a positive light during these challenging times, where we use questions from the Green Card Voices Story Stitch card game. Let's get into the introductions. The questions include: what is your name? Your nickname, your ethnic name, whatever you want. Where do you consider home? What languages do you speak? And share something special about yourself. And you'll get to share a lot of special things about yourselves throughout the podcast, but whatever you want to tell now. So I'll lead. My name is Tri Minvo. My pronouns are he, she, they. I consider home what I told Bo and Noshina of the first podcast, which folks should check out. It's the one right before this one. I consider home wherever the music is, wherever there's good rock music, punk music, stuff that gets people to get dancing, to really listen to the message, and to just have a good time without having to think too hard about like the really challenging things in life if they don't want to. But I also call Eagan, Minnesota home. I call Minneapolis home. What languages do I speak? I speak Vietnamese well enough, I guess. My grandma has issues with it, but she's a Vietnamese grandma. What can I do? But everyone else likes it. English, I speak some German, speak a little Portuguese. And something special about myself, back to the home, I really love punk music. I love things that are simple creative performance arts that people can join in and be collaborative without having to know too many rules. And so I'd like to open the floor to either Hoang or Mk to introduce yourselves.
Okay, I will go first. I think Mk is taking care of some baby stuff. So my name is Hoang Murphy. My pronouns are he, him, his. I guess for me, it's always felt like as an adoptee and as someone who's in foster care, but lived with my family until 8 years old. I think the core identity is one for me. It's a really challenging question. Even the start of like, what is your name, is a loaded question for me. Like, am I Nguyen or Nguyen? Am I Hoang? Am I Hoang? Or am I all the other things that I've been called throughout my entire life that are proximate to my name? And how much do I get to define that for myself? When I have Viet folks to the right of me saying that you're not Vietnamese enough or not Asian enough to fit into what we consider our people, and very clearly not white, so therefore don't get to fully embrace the identity either. And so I've always felt I'm in this middle place, neither here nor there, as Hoang Murphy. And that used to really bother me. It used to felt like I didn't belong there. But instead of trying to find a tribe, I think, moving back to the east side of St. Paul and all of its richness and diversity, I've been able to create a tribe here. of folks who are misfits, folks who don't follow the rules of their particular space, but want to fit in with other people who don't really fit in. I consider home the east side of St. Paul, and the idea of home squared, kind of your ancestral home, in the sense of like where people gather. Someone who grew up in the foster care system and but was later adopted. I also consider Ada, Minnesota home as well. It's where I went to high school, and where some fundamental years of growing up worked for me. I only speak English, but I am, desperately trying to learn Spanish. Hasn't stuck yet. And I've started just a tiny bit of Vietnamese and, dipping my toe in the water with that. So, I always have a hard time when someone says, share something special about yourself, because I think that's it's such a difficult question for one, Asian Minnesotans who are taught to be humble, or Asians rather, and then Minnesotans who are taught to also be humble. And as Asian Minnesotans, then we get that double pressure to not say anything interesting about ourselves ever. But for me, I guess just some things I like are I'm a big fan of Fiona the Hippo. I like doing advocacy in politics, and I like meeting my neighbors.
Hey y'all, sorry about that. I just had to pass out baby to somebody, and that somebody is the love of my life. So.
I need to squeeze that in. Aw.
Shout out Typhy.
Typhy.
Okay, so my name is Mk Nguyen, or in the Viet version, Nguyen Lan Merikim. So where do I consider home? I would say everywhere, nowhere, when my body, mind, and spirit is seen as my first home. I think 21st century life is so mired with uncertainty that, I always am especially right now, if we can't pay for a home, if we can't pay a mortgage, what'll happen? And I'm a Taurus. And so I need certainty. And I think, I've resolved home as being defined as a place, where, home is first in my body. It's for me, home is a concentric circle that I think starts with my body. And then it extends out to my relationship with other people. And then it extends to my relationship with the planet. And so home is that. What languages do I speak? I speak Viet conversationally. And I know a little bit of French and Spanish, and I know how to say thank you and show gratitude in many languages. Something special about myself. My son is in Taurus. So I am stubborn and strong, and I'm not a leader, but I can see leadership a mile away. I remember when I was in middle school reading that horoscope, and I'm like, that's me. And I think what it's translated into is me being a culture worker, a teacher, and an organizer. And another thing about myself is that I feel a really strong kinship to the connectors of the world, which I think is best embodied in my non-human kin, the bumblebee and mycelium.
Thank you. Those were really great introductions. Really glad to have you both on. And MK, when you said my son's in Taurus, I'm like, which son? I didn't realize you meant SUN. Okay. Anyhow, so now that everyone's introduced, I would love to get into the core questions. The question one from our Stories to Stitch questions with the extended COVID bonus questions. The first COVID question is, describe the many ways your life has changed in recent weeks.
Yeah, so everyone's life has changed. No one certainly saw a global pandemic on the horizon, and maybe some epidemiologists somewhere did, but certainly not me here in the east side of St. Paul. I guess reflecting for me is that we moved our work. I founded a nonprofit called Foster advocates to work with people who have experienced foster care to create policy change. And that just means that we're now, with the legislative session is largely closed down and virtual. So a lot of work from home. And just a reflection on that, I'm extremely lucky in that sense, that luckier than most, that my work can shift to a home-based setting where my work is wherever a computer is and a decent internet connection. I guess that's what's really shifted is that, my wife's a kindergarten teacher. And so for her, it's really then just recording lessons here at home. But otherwise, it's just trying to stay sane and stay positive and just know that, we're looking out for each other and that the advocacy space just moves into a digital arena, but that doesn't make it any less important.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I also, in the Story Stitch game where we ask these questions, there's this function where a person stitches or shows a card and says, I would like to share, to add on to that. And I'll stitch by saying, neither did I. I did not expect any of this. There's probably some smarty people in the world that I wish weren't being distrusted by like government officials and all that, if that's still a consistent thing, who knew this was going to happen and we should have prepared more. And yeah, the digital advocacy space is new and very imperative now to learn and to ramp up and to figure out how to still connect people and to do outreach, even though it's just been thrusted on our plates. And yeah, that's just the new reality and one that we have to learn quickly so that we can address these issues together. Describe the many ways your life has changed in recent weeks.
So our school districts are closed. Our food banks are closed. There's a mandatory stay-at-home order. Families are all home together all day long, 24 hours a day. So the biggest transition, I think, has been me being every single thing to my kids right now. Before COVID, before we were all ordered to stay at home, there was a vast network of people, a vast and beautiful village that was a part of, nurturing my kids, and they still are. It's just not physically. So I have to intentionally reorganize my brain, my set of expectations, my life, so that I can be my kids' primary teacher, classroom, and other things, and that I am readily available to be my other kids' milk machine, which before COVID, when I was working, I would be pumping, but now it's like whenever he wants it, he has it. And it feels kind of like maternity leave part 2. I feel like, I get to be with my kids, and my husband, which is amazing. We are very intentional about taking care of one another and being kind to one another. And so for me, I feel like something that's shifted is that my 4-year-old is less of an asshole to me. I think when I was working a lot and out a lot and in the community a lot, he would test me a lot. And there would be lots of passive aggressive attitudes and behaviors that we would constantly have to negotiate. And now, since we are at home all day long together and that we just get to share more space and time with each other, I think our relationship has become more loving, more fun and joyful. There's some hope that I have, from this pandemic, just noticing how much, that people have to pause and stop. So Adrienne May Brown has this quote, things aren't getting worse, they're just getting revealed. And so we must hold each other tight and unveil or pull the covers off of what has always been happening. And I feel like there is this massive pause and this massive shift that we're all in. And there's questions that I feel like I think about all the time, that now I get to think with other people around, more people, like the possibility of this other world, the possibility of untethering ourselves from this like old extractive economy and world that we all either reluctantly or willfully like participate in. I think what's really shifted in my life is, this choice, like seeing this choice that's like way more in my face than it's ever been before. This choice or this decision I have to make on whether I'm going to continue to participate in like this like accelerated like mass extinction and like collapse of like human species, or if I'm going to choose intentionally, and integrate this awareness that I have towards, like a world and an economy that's like way more regenerative and is valuing like sacredness of human beings, that is like pushing, for like everybody to have their basic needs. I think those are the things that have been really shifting and changing in my life, is like needing to sit down and sit with that choice of either collapse or like intentional like reorganization of my whole life, my whole being, and my relationship to people and planet.
Thank you, MK. All very
That's
big.
long. My bad.
It's all the truth. The truth. You're revealing so much truth. Just pulling it back. Pulling back some more. We're moving on to the fourth question on our COVID bonus questions, which is, tell a story about a time when you experienced community amid the coronavirus pandemic. And if Hoang, you'd like to take it away again.
It's so telling that, I experienced community, over a digital space, where it was the moment where I felt that I think most was there was another foster care advocate who reached out to me, who now works for, a different group, but they founded one, like a foster care advocacy org in Indiana, and they reached out and they're like, hey, we know fosters are having a hard time around the country. Can you give us a list of names of folks here in the Twin Cities that you're connected with? I could use a little bit of a boost and around transportation, and ride sharing apps and things like that. And I was able to connect those folks with it, and share with the local school district here and a couple nonprofits around the area. And I thought that was just an amazing moment of solidarity, where where in the worst cases of the pandemic, right, we always have this fear in an apocalyptic scenario that it's going to be like Mad Max, that people are going to be hunting each other and going off, and what we instead see, and we don't even have to look very hard for it, is people caring for each other, people reaching out to help, people doing more of an effort every single day to try to look out for their neighbors. And I think those things are there, even if they're not making the news. And I got to see a part of that, and be a small little ripple in that larger wave towards more kindness and more justice. And for me, it just gave me a lot more hope and a lot more faith in the human experience. And that's what I remind myself and look to when I watch people kind of protesting the immigration orders, or the Trump administration saying that they're going to block all immigration in the U.S., which doesn't make any logical sense to me. That the economy is safe enough to open, but it's too safe to allow immigrants to come to the country. It just doesn't hold up. But it's these moments that kind of keep me sane and just make sure that there are great people out there, and we just need to elevate those voices and those folks.
Thank you, Hoang. I'm glad that you have a positive outlook on things. Where there are really good things to get out of this, because there's so much room for the opposite. So always good to see where the good energy is at, so that we can push towards that. MK, would you like to go?
There's so many times when I get to experience community during this time. And in fact, I think it's because of the intentional community building that's like helping me get through this in a calm way. Before COVID, like I just couldn't there are many groups and many efforts that I would love to be a part of, but struggle to find time to do. I still get, updates. And so I've used this opportunity to just catch up with people and to enter spaces that I normally like just appreciate from afar, because I'm like in doing other things. Just popping in and being able to rebuild and reconnect with people who I really adore, but just are doing other, doing work that I'm currently not really deep into at the moment. But yeah, one of those examples would be, getting on like a Million Artist Movement call. Like I'm a part of that network, but I just don't make the calls. And this one time that I did make the call just because I needed people's spirits, to feel people's spirits. Kurt Ru Kim was on the call, and so was Alizarin. And from that call, it sparked another call for us three to think through what I call what we call like family reunion, engage in family reunion, where, we try to create a space where all the loose Asians can come together. Loose radical Asians can come together and be one collective of radical Asians. I have gotten a chance to reconnect with my Viet homies from across the United States. And right now we're engaging in collective Viet healing through just checking in with each other. Like I get to be a part of the Ethnic Studies Coalition and support like young people's leadership in, pushing our state to open up space and open up resources for young people to access culturally relevant curriculum and pedagogy from a first person's perspective. I've been a part of Zoom brunches where, my folks in the Bay Area and I are connecting and eating together and talking. I've been a part of quarantine karaoke nights with Adrian Perriman. Where he like dresses up as Prince and he's got like disco lights and like his DJ set, and there's people from the neighborhood who are participating in this karaoke thing together, and I get to see like people's houses who I know but have never been in the house of, and like we're singing together, and it's gotten so like it's such a great event that now there's people from Boston and Texas who are like joining in on that. Tree and I think got a chance to pop in to like a Seed New Year dance party, and we all danced together.
And for the audiences, will you name what Seed project is for?
It's the Southeast Asian Diaspora Project. I think an organization and a crew that Tree and I both vibe with. And last week, the fam and I were part of an organized like social distancing neighborhood cleanup project where we, all took. There was this one dude named Abu in our neighborhood who organized like little grids, and my quadrant was F2, and we just like walked around with Stokely on the bike and baby strapped to my chest, and Typhy with plastic gloves and like some tongs, like taking on one little piece of that earth to clean up and beautify. Also building community through just through work in the neighborhood, creating, co-creating like a mutual aid, like a Frogtown Roundel mutual aid like plan that people in our like residents in our neighborhood can offer what they can and ask for what they need. And then right now, the thing that I'm really focused on is just the idea of growing food in our neighborhood and protecting our ability to grow food. We have like this beautiful like 5-acre urban farm called Frogtown Farm that's in our neighborhood. And there was, news, an announcement that the leadership had made that they were going to cover crop the farm, and against the recommendations of their former staff and against the recommendations of the U of M and against the recommendations of pretty much everybody who is saying like now is the time more than ever where we need to double down on growing food and choosing to build our muscles or strengthen our muscles around food sovereignty, food justice, food security, just like growing our own food.
Heck yeah, so many communities. MK is just naming them all off here in the Twin Cities. So Seed Project, actually National Viet Progressives group. For all the Viet listeners out there, you should check them out. I think their public facing name is Pivot. So look for that. If you're looking for community with other left-wing, values-driven Vietnamese folks, reach out at social media at greencardvoices.org. Thanks, MK. Thanks, Hoang. So we're going to move on to 2 questions that are more oriented towards you both as community leaders, as people who are connected in ways where resources can be brought out into community for folks to use. The first question is, what do you, your community or organizations you're passionate about, need to get through the pandemic? How can people help? And how would you like to offer your resources to others, or the things that you're working on to make change happen?
Yeah, so this is Hoang here. I'm just going to jump in at this point. Yeah, I think, one is a clear one. I would say there's a lot of nonprofits out there, a lot of organizations out there that, without your help are not going to make it. That when there's a downturn in the economy, and I think any projection that says we're not going to have the question is not whether or not we have a downturn. The question is this a recession or is this going to be a depression in the economy? The issue largely with the pandemic is that it's a supply side and a demand side issue, whereas recessions usually are one or the other. This is hurting both ends of the supply chain, and so what that affects, and the reason why I said it is because foundations, they do their giving largely based on how well the stock market performs, and they only give 5% total. Is like usually what they have to give of their foundation amounts. What that then means, though, is that the nonprofits and orgs that rely on this institutional giving are going to be really, really hurting. So some of the orgs that I know that I'm going to shout out that really could use your help are, Seed, which MK was just talking about earlier, the Southeast Asian Diaspora Project. These are some of the orgs that we could be giving to, especially their Sea Change efforts, which is that that's their direct aid effort. Reach out to the Southeast Asian communities to say, hey, what do you need? How can we help? I'm a donor myself. Recently participated in a papaya salad eating contest with them, just to help them raise some dollars. I would say, there's just a lot of others in every local area. Just do a quick search, ask around. Someone's gonna know somebody, and they're all deserving. But I would not be an effective founder and effective executive director if I did not shout out my own org, which is Foster Advocates. We work with people who have experienced foster to create policy change, and it's more necessary now that we get funding, simply because when we look at our communities, we're going to be hurt the hardest, right? When we talk about sheltering in place, what does that look like when a person doesn't have shelter? Or there is no place to someone who doesn't have a family or is separated from their family. What does that mean to find comfort and to find community? And these are all things that I don't think are being caused by the COVID-19 crisis. The COVID-19 crisis is exacerbating, expanding, and greatly elevating issues that were largely going to be ignored otherwise, right? Foster care issues are only going to be increasing. Educational neglect calls are only going to increase as we move to distance and online learning. And so are the mandatory, child visits and reports. We also know that from previous recessions, 2008, we saw the largest loss of Black and, POCI wealth in the history of the U.S., aside from Reconstruction. That is on the table for potential things that can happen now. And what we're going to see then, like 2008, is an incredible increase in child welfare cases, incredible increase of foster care involved young people being ignored and being, left out of the systems that are meant to serve them. Right now, status quo is that half of all fosters, when they turn 18, within 6 months, are going to be homeless. That's only going to get worse. COVID-19 is not going to make that better unless we do something about it. So unless it is that you're giving to orgs, unless you're supporting through your advocacy, reach out to your state representatives, your senators, and saying that foster care issues are important to you and that you want to see them do more change. And also then send them to us. Send them to Hoang Murphy at fosteradvocates.org. I would love to chat with them about what they can be doing and what we can use, what tools they have available to really help the community. And and also if you are in need of help, please reach out to us. We don't do direct service, but I will absolutely love to connect you all with anyone that does, especially if you're a foster or are involved in a foster care community. I would love to reach out and have those conversations. As one of the few Asian American folks that I see publicly talking about the Asian, the intersection of child welfare and Asian American identities, we know that our communities are hit hard by child welfare cases. In Ramsey County, we're the fastest growing in population in need of child welfare services. Please reach out. We are an impacted community, and there are folks that want to be here to help, and I would like to count myself among one of them.
Thank you, Hoang. And to reiterate, Foster Advocates, that's the org, and you can reach out at Hoang, Hoang. We'll try to leave some info in the description, as well as SEED Project, South SEAD Project, are to the orgs that Hoang just named. Thank you, Hoang. MK, do you have a response?
This the Arundhati Roy quote that is circulating, where she speaks about the pandemic. And can I read it to you all? So historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and reimagine the world anew. This is no different. This current pandemic, it is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice, hatred, and our avarice, our data banks and our dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. Yeah, I can't. So in the way that I've been taught to look at things is that there's like 6 conditions for systemic change to happen. And where it starts first is like if you look at it, it's mental model shifting. And once you get a chance to shift the way that you think of things, like your mental paradigm, then the way you build relationships, the power dynamics that exist in your life, the way that policies are made or procedures are created and followed, and the way that resources flows like shifts and changes. And I think for me, I keep thinking about how important it is, I think, to see support as like many different things, but to see what we have to do in like 2 loops. And so there's like this old world that right now has been dying, and there's this like new world that is emerging, and that I think there's plenty of room for us to define what that role is. Everybody has a role in the movement. Not every role is for everybody, and that you have to, like, your one job that you need to do for the sake of our survival as like a human species is to like figure out what your role is, like from a place of gifts and purpose, something that you can do and just do and do, and that it just automatically and inherently nourishes you back, right? And do it well. And that my hope, and as we're talking about like sea change, right? I mean, Grace Lee Boggs talks a lot about that, is that, as somebody who is who wants revolution and who is coming, trying and seeing revolution from like this person who was like born and raised like on Turtle Island, that's like laced with like toxic white supremacist capitalist heteropatriarchy. Like this is, I think, the change that I need from folks, and the change that we are all capable of doing is to be able to do self-study and to figure out, you know, within ourselves, like what can we do to walk into this new world, and what can we, you know, like, so I think about a lot, especially during this time, like this idea of like grieving, right? And this idea of like letting go, you know, of things like patterns that don't serve us anymore. And then so that we can actually be able to transition justly, you know, into like a world and a society economy that I think like sees our humanity as well as like sacred. I think that the biggest thing that that like resource that I would like to put out into this podcast, right, and this conversation is like the resources that are already within us, right? And to do that work of like digging deeply as possible so that we are able to reach one another in like the most meaningful way.
Thank you, MK. And so one more question before we get into our last question. Are there any resources that you're recommending to your community? Yeah, digitally.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'd love for people to look at is Movement Generation's work. They're Bay Area based collective of think like just geniuses and doers and culture workers who are trying to help us all transition justly from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And they do a lot of knowledge production that helps us be able to figure out, you know, how we can get back into right relationship with ourselves, with other people, and with the planet. Once you start there and you follow it everywhere, you're going to find so many more resources and networks like Culture Strike and the Center for Story-Based Strategy and Education for Liberation and all the things, all the good things and the delicious things that make up this world.
Hoang, would you like to speak on this question?
Yeah, so since MK covered like the larger future-looking and like tribe building kind of work, I guess I would take it. The only thing I would add is just the more immediate one. So if you're living in St. Paul, there's the St. Paul Bridge Fund. Please apply. It's for folks who are, if you qualify for MFIP or WIC or any like really particular needs. Please apply for this. This is an additional amount of dollars, cash assistance for folks who are being impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. There is, salary and income restrictions, but if you, feel like because of recent loss of work or because of, current life challenges, you're still encouraged to apply, even if you, do go above the kind of income restrictions that do apply for it. But please reach out. Now is the time, to reach out and ask for help. There's a similar one over in Minneapolis. I just know it just because, St. Paul is home. I would also say that, for folks who run a small business, which as we know, so many, folks who come from immigrant communities, their first step into America is into a small restaurant or family-owned business or like grocery. And those are the folks that are going to be hit really hard right now. So although we know that the, payroll protection program that is meant for small businesses is, currently out of funds federally, there is a lot of conversation about, expanding those dollars and restricting and recouping some of those monies that maybe went to folks that didn't. So I would say still apply. You'll be put on, the wait list for it, but there is a level of hope that some of those dollars will then eventually be allocated to the wait list. So you should really reach out. And the payroll protection program is through the, Small Business Administration at the federal level, and it's a forgivable loan. It's a loan that if you borrow from it, if as long as you keep your staff on salary for the duration of the, of some of the terms, then that money is not money you have to repay. The other one I would say is the Small Business Assistance Loan, which is $10,000. That one is a loan, but for a lot of folks, that $10,000 loan, that a very low interest rate can be really helpful right now. So those are the kind of the three resources I would throw out there. I would also say reach out to your food banks and your shelters and apply for unemployment insurance. I think you should be reaching out and trying to get assistance wherever you can. And I would just encourage any legislators and any policymakers out there who are listening, please do some type of action and some type of result around rental assistance and freezing of rental payments that won't cause folks to be in rental debt at the end of this COVID crisis. Freezing rent isn't enough if at the end of the 3 months you are $3,000 in debt. I would love for folks to address that.
Fabulous. So glad you both are here. Our last question before we wrap up the first part
of our conversation. And this is from our positive set of questions from the Story Stitch deck. And it is, tell about a time when your life felt abundant.
When I get to be in community with like just a biodiversity of like brilliant, badass Viet and non-Viet people. Like, I think that's when I feel the most sense of abundance, is when I have complete faith that we will slow down the 6 mass extinction period of our lives right now, because there's good people, well people doing good work. I think that's where I feel the most abundance, is when I hear stories, when I am like speaking, having conversations.
Hoang, do you have any feelings?
Yeah, a time in my life that I felt abundant. You all asked great questions. I would say there are so many moments, and abundance is such an interesting word, because it's all relative, right? Like, it was something in the discussion around wealth, and I'd always felt like as a kid growing up low income, even post adoption, my dad was a truck driver who really struggled with addiction and mental health issues, and my mom was postal clerk, but then she left that work to take care of my brother and I, my brother being a significantly he needs a lot of support and help post adoption, and I always felt that teachers and folks who I would very much consider lower middle class now as incredibly wealthy, because I felt like they had enough food to eat and all these other things. So I guess in every moment of my life, I've felt this tension of both incredible abundance and incredible scarcity. And I think it's because we live in a world in which the U.S. is the richest country in the history of the world, and yet there are folks who are allowed to starve, allowed to go homeless, and allowed to go, feeling unwelcomed here. And so I think one of those clearer tensions and paradoxes is in my work founding a nonprofit. That was never my goal, right? I moved back to the state of Minnesota because I wanted to be home after the transition in the federal government in DC. And I saw this incredible need here, that there was no other org that was doing policy work around specifically foster care, and with the foster care community, in mind as the leader on what impacts us the most. And I saw the abundance most clearly, though, when we got funded. As a brand new org, as a 26-year-old founding a nonprofit, there were folks and foundations here in Minnesota that were willing to give and willing us, to make a bet that this was needed, and that that we were going to be able to be successful. And only here is that possible. And that's kind of my tension about Minnesota, is that it was only possible to found this nonprofit here because of the scarcity that existed in our community in the first place. And it's that paradox that I think about when I was working on the East Coast, in which that the idea there was that we all knew that there was a problem, but we felt like it was a hard and difficult path to try to get the resources into community to solve those problems. And here in Minnesota, the tension that I feel is different, and it's opposite, in that we have the resources to solve so much here, if only we would acknowledge and recognize that there's a problem. So I'm not sure that answers the question, but that's kind of what I'm really thinking about the term abundance and all the tension and paradoxes that come with that.
Too true, Hoang. Too true.
I'm a co-sign on that one.
I do have deep love and trust for Mr. Hoang Murphy. I just, he's, I don't mess with any, with just anybody, but I mess with Hoang. Hoang is a deeply principled human being, and so I just wanted to name that.
Hi, it's Tree, back from the future, and I just wrapped up our first ever extended guest recording, or what we'd like to call our Patreon Stitch Picks. With the podcast guests you've heard from tonight, listen to Hoang speaking to his experience surviving foster care, making himself invisible as a foster care child and as an Asian American adult, and growing into a conviction of making our struggles and voices as Asian Americans more visible and more heard today. Also hear from Mk, reflecting on her parenting, her experience with her own parents and village of caretakers as a child, and the challenges of making choices with scarce adult support for much of her formative years. Lastly, hear about Hoang and Mk sharing memories centering the scent of cut grass, lilac, and earwax. The following words are how Mk and Hoang would describe their experience making space for themselves in their hashtag Love Your Asian Neighbors recording.
It's like we all have stories that I think are dying to get out, and this is was a great moment to where I could share a part of my story, and just wanted to thank you all for providing that space.
Joyful. I like all three of you a lot.
Head on over to Patreon and take a listen, and tell us in the comments if you feel the same way. This has been Tree. Thanks again for listening to the hashtag Love Your Asian Neighbors podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. The questions that guide this episode were drawn from Green Card Voice's Virtual Story Stitch activity. Virtual Story Stitch is a modified version of GCV's Story Stitch conversation card game. Story Stitch was co-created with 70 community members as a way to build deep connections between immigrants and their neighbors by telling stories, opening minds, and encouraging people to get to know one another. In March of 2020, responding to the COVID-19, also named the coronavirus pandemic, we co-created it again and came up with a virtual version of the game to stay connected, share our stories, and feel less isolated during the time of social distancing. In addition to the 33 questions in Green Card Voice's Story Stitch deck, we have added 7 bonus questions pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic. For more information, visit patreon.com, spelled Patreon/Virtual Story Stitch. If you're ready to have access to your own Virtual Story Stitch kit, join by becoming a patron on our Patreon today and give what you can. Your support funds the free services and resources we offer to our community. Thank you.